Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really critical and I think very resonant story that weaves together music, struggle, and global solidarity.
We're focusing on a group that was just uncompromisingly political.
Mm.
The Palestinian-Swedish band Kofia, and the man who was really the driving force behind it all, George Tori.
And the source material we have for this is incredible. It's mostly from a documentary film about the band, and it goes so much deeper than just music history.
It really does. It's a study in how art, specifically music, becomes, well, an absolutely essential tool for political survival,
Mhm.
for holding on to an identity when, all the other channels are closed off.
All the conventional avenues, right? Like media, diplomacy.
Exactly. When those are systematically shut down, what do you have left?
So our mission today is to really dissect how Kofia used what they called alternative music to become this undeniable, unapologetic voice for the Palestinian struggle, especially across Northern Europe.
Yeah, and we're going to get into their philosophy, the sacrifices the members made, both the Swedish and the Palestinian members. And of course, we have to drill down into their most famous track,
The anthem, Leve Palestina.
which means long live Palestine. And the hook that grabs you right away is this incredible tension. You have the universal power of music on one hand.
Something that everyone can connect with.
Right. And on the other, it's crashing headlong into this really sharp, really dangerous political repression. I mean, we're talking about a band that faced visa denials constantly.
And even had soldiers come on stage while they were playing in Europe.
In Europe, it's astonishing.
And that gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The purpose of this music, as they said themselves, it wasn't entertainment. It wasn't about making money.
It was pure necessity. George Katari's whole vision for Kofia was for it to be a kind of singing newspaper, a way to get the immediate, unfiltered stories of oppression out there when nobody else was listening.
Or when the media was actively silencing that narrative, his vision and the dedication of all the members really make sure that experience was heard and felt and remembered.
Loud enough to cut through all that institutional silence.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. We have to unpack the origins. Who is George Tori? What was it about his life, his experience, that created this absolute unwavering need to use music this way?
Well, his story is so tied up in the history of the conflict itself. He was born in Jerusalem in 1948, specifically the East Side.
And the timing there is critical.
It's everything. He was born just months before the State of Israel was officially declared. So his earliest memories, they're not just family stories. They are rooted in the chaos and trauma of that displacement. It gives him this primary visceral connection to the land and, well, to the loss.
So it's not history from a book for him. It's his family's lived reality from day one.
Exactly. And after 1948, his family moved to Jordan for a bit, but came back in 1952, and eventually they settled in Nazareth. But coming back home didn't mean freedom or safety. He grew up in Nazareth, which at the time was classified as a military area under Israeli martial law. And you really can't overstate how important that detail is to understanding his entire political outlook later on.
Living in a military area, I mean, what does that actually do to daily life? How deep did that control go?
It was suffocating. It was this kind of constant low-grade psychological pressure. The sources describe how any basic movement was, in effect, criminalized without permission. If you wanted to leave Nazareth for any reason, to go to another town for work, to visit families, anything,
Yeah.
you needed military permission. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. It was this constant bureaucratic friction. I mean, just imagine needing a soldier's signature just to exist in the world around you. The whole system was designed to control, to subordinate the Arab population.
That constant surveillance must create this overwhelming sense of being unfree.
It did. And it absolutely forged his understanding of oppression. He sums it up perfectly. He says, always we felt that we are not freedom. And it was made worse because even if you follow the rules, it didn't protect you.
What do you mean?
Well, he tells this story about his friends. He even names one, Tegad, who were arrested and detained even when they had the proper military permit to travel.
So the permit didn't matter. It was just proof of obedience, but the suspicion was always there.
Exactly. The mindset, as he describes it, from the authorities was basically that as an Arab in Israel, you are wrong. It wasn't about what you did. It was about who you were. And that feeling that you're inherently wrong no matter what, That's the fire that fueled Kofia.
That's a powerful motivator. So let's talk about when he leaves. The year 1967 is highlighted as critical.
Yeah, hugely critical. He was actually scheduled to come to Sweden on June 15th, 1967. So he leaves Palestine that year, right in the middle of the Six-Day War, which, led to the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem.
A massive, violent turning point.
A massive turning point. So he arrives in Sweden carrying this immediate, raw history of defeat. And he makes this observation that by the time the film was made, he'd actually lived more of his life in Sweden than in Palestine, but his entire drive, his core, was still fixed on his homeland.
So his music was never just an artistic choice. It was an absolute political necessity.
That's the core of it. He saw that for the people who were still under occupation back home, music was how they survived. It was the only way they could, in his words, breathe out this oppression. They used folk songs, resistance literature, these massive parties where they'd sing with this incredible passion.
It was a way to...
It was fundamentally a matter of to show that we exist. When a political power is trying to make you invisible, just existing and expressing that existence through culture becomes the primary act of resistance.
And this is what's so key for Kofia's beginning. When Tori gets to Sweden, he sees this huge information vacuum.
A massive one. He gets there and is just shocked that people in Sweden knew nothing about Palestine. He saw it as a void that was, deliberately created by the mainstream media. And worse, he saw that the official channels, the Arab ambassadors there, were doing nothing.
They weren't advocating.
They were failing completely to use their position to raise awareness. And that failure, that silence in the West, combined with the inaction from official Arab bodies, that's what created the profound necessity for Kofia.
So he realized if the story is going to be told, it had to be grassroots.
Exactly. It couldn't rely on governments or media. It had to be direct, from the people to the people. And his commitment to filling that void, that became the red thread that held the whole movement and the band together for decades. It wasn't a band. It was a mission.
Okay, so if we move from the man to the movement, Kofia didn't just appear out of nowhere, right? It was born into a very specific political and musical moment in Sweden.
Oh, absolutely. The early 1970s in Sweden were the perfect incubator for a band like Kofia.
The 70s in Europe, a very politicized time. Anti-establishment, leftist movements everywhere. How did that specifically play out in the music scene Kofia walked into?
It was a complete revolution against commercial culture. The source says that alternative music bands grew like mushrooms, everywhere. The whole ideology was radically anti-consumer. The message was everybody play.
The ultimate do-it-yourself ethos.
It was a total rejection of the music industry. You weren't supposed to be a passive consumer. You were supposed to build your own networks, book your own shows, and in a lot of cases, literally build your own instruments. And that spirit of radical independence was a perfect match for the political independence Kofia was fighting for.
So they formed right in the middle of this wave. And what made them unique, I imagine, was their membership.
Absolutely. Kofia was immediately different because it was this deliberate, powerful mix of Palestinians and Swedes working together. That was key. It gave them an instant foothold in the leftist solidarity scenes, where standing with marginalized groups was, a core value.
So the Swedish members brought the local knowledge, the organizational skills.
And the Palestinian members brought the authentic narrative, the cultural urgency.
But the sources say that a lot of these bands that grew like mushrooms didn't last. They fell down. So why did Kofia survive for decades? What was their special drive?
Well, the sources are really clear on this. Kofia lasted because their members were united by something much deeper than just music. There were three main reasons. First, and most importantly, George Tori had a very strong drive. That red thread we talked about, his personal mission, was the engine.
And the second reason?
They had dedicated Palestinian people in the group. That kept the message authentic, rooted in lived experience. It wasn't just an abstract cause for them.
Then the third.
All the members, Swedes and Palestinians alike, really wanted to play political music. It wasn't about fame or style. It was about using music as a tool. That shared purpose made them function more like a permanent solidarity movement with a soundtrack.
That makes sense. That's a strong foundation. But let's get to the music itself. What did they sound like? Because they weren't just playing traditional Arabic music, right?
No, they had to create something totally new, their own sound. The description is that they were not really traditional Arabic, but also not entirely Western rock or pop. They were something in between. And they had to find that sound together through improvisation and collaboration.
It's like a musical expression of the diaspora experience itself, rooted in one culture but existing and communicating in another.
Exactly. And they pulled from everywhere. At that time in Europe, there was a lot of interest in Greek resistance music, things like the bouzouki.
Which was a symbol of resistance against the military junta in Greece.
Precisely. So one of the members played the bouzouki, and that brought in this passionate Mediterranean folk resistance sound. But crucially, the Arabic percussion, the rhythm, instruments like the durbeg, those were played by the Palestinian members. That's what grounded the music in the cultural memory of home.
So they're blending all these different traditions of resistance, the Greek bouzouki, the Swedish DIY scene, and powering it all with these Arabic rhythms and melodies. That's an incredibly potent mix.
And their openness was key. They weren't purists. They took inspiration from everywhere and made it their own. And that whole project was held together by Tori's political dedication, ensuring the music always served the mission.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, moving beyond the music into the philosophy behind it. Kofia made this very deliberate choice. Their music had to be a direct source of information, a singing newspaper.
That was their core methodology. Every performance was a political lecture, every song a report from the ground. They didn't see a song as entertainment. They saw it as a narrative device. The whole philosophy was simple and direct. Every song is a story. It tells you a story.
And these stories were tailored specifically for their European audience, to fill that knowledge gap Tori saw when he first arrived.
Exactly. The songs were explicitly for the Swedes, to tell them what is happening. It was an educational project. Tori even described his process. He would read the newspaper and to make a song out of an article and to sing it. They were taking cold, hard facts the Swedish press was ignoring and giving them an emotional core.
So it's basically journalism, but set to this urgent, uncompromising soundtrack. It's not just resistance, it's documentation.
It's musical eyewitness testimony. It forces the listener to become a witness, too. And this was actually a big departure, even for their Palestinian audience back home.
How so?
Well, Palestinian resistance music often involved singing a famous poem, by someone like Mahmoud Darwish, which is incredibly powerful, but often more abstract.
And Kofia wanted to be immediate, concrete.
Yes. They wanted to teach the struggle, to give people specific details about what was happening right now, the daily oppression, the violence. Their message was, listen to this song and you will understand today's reality.
Can you give us a concrete example of that eyewitness thing in their lyrics?
One of the most powerful examples is a song about South Lebanon. And it's written in the first person to put you right there. It goes, I'm sitting in my house. I hear a big thunder of Israeli bomb planes coming over my house.
Wow. That's so simple and direct.
It's chilling. It's the definition of the eyewitness thing. It just cuts through all the political jargon and forces a listener in, say, Gothenburg, to feel that immediate fear. It turns a headline into a personal trauma.
But it wasn't just about documenting the suffering, right? They also wanted to show strength.
Absolutely. And they do that visually, too. Look at the cover of their second album, The Earth of My Homeland. The band had these long political debates about what image to use. They chose a photo of a Palestinian mother.
Why a mother's face? What did that convey?
It was a very conscious decision to reject the passive victim narrative. This woman is strong, she's active, she's baking bread, which is this powerful symbol of life and culture, but she's also continuing the struggle. She represents dignity, persistence, the idea that nationhood is maintained in these fundamental daily acts.
And Kofia was also connecting the Palestinian struggle to global movements, which was very much a part of that 70s and 80s solidarity mindset.
Oh, it was central to their ideology.
Yeah.
They were constantly making these explicit political connections. They sang in support of movements in South Africa and Palestine, drawing direct comparisons between the apartheid regime there and the situation in Palestine.
So they were framing it not as a unique, isolated conflict, but as part of a global fight against imperialism.
Exactly. And that broadened their appeal. Now let's talk about the friction this caused. Their style was described by critics as very aggressive and very hard. If their goal was to educate Swedes, was there a risk of alienating the very people they were trying to reach?
That's a great question. Was that aggressive message maybe counterproductive?
Well, Kofia saw it as a necessary disruption. Complacency was the real enemy. There's this one phrase that really exemplifies their intensity. They sang about fire against the Zionism and the Arab reactionaries and the imperialism.
That is deliberately provocative. And they weren't just targeting Israel there. We should probably clarify what they meant by Arab reactionaries.
That's crucial context. In the political language of the 70s leftist movements, Arab reactionaries meant Arab regimes, usually monarchies or conservative governments, that were seen as being too aligned with Western, especially American, interests.
So their critique was that the Palestinian struggle was being undermined from all sides.
Precisely. By external occupation, by Western interference, and by compromised Arab leadership. And this hard, uncompromising message was, quote, something new for them, the European listeners. It was designed to shatter complacency and force people to confront the painful truth of the occupation, the killing of children. Truths they felt were being completely ignored by the media. They refused to water it down.
So that unwavering commitment, it put them on a collision course with a lot of powerful interests.
It did. They weren't just a local band. They became this international instrument of solidarity, and that put them directly in harm's way, time and time again.
And the most dramatic example of that has to be their trip to Iran in 1980. That was just after the revolution. What was that like?
I mean, it was an incredibly tense, unstable environment. They were invited to play for people who had just overthrown the Shah. The invitation came from revolutionary groups like the Fedayeen and Mojahedin.
And why them? Why Kofia?
Because those groups saw a common struggle. They linked the fight of the Chilean people, the Palestinian people, and the Iranian people as one global front against imperialism and fascism. And there was a personal connection, too. One of the Iranian leaders had actually received training in Lebanon with the PLO.
So there was a deep sense of gratitude and shared history there.
A profound one. George Tori had even written a song called Iran, My Country from the Heart of Palestine. So the Iranians wanted to show their solidarity by bringing this prominent Palestinian band to Tehran.
But walking into a country still in the middle of a revolution, that must have been terrifying.
The band had to think, long and hard about it. The source says it was a kind of very tense situation there because it was a revolution going on. The atmosphere was electric, but also deeply volatile. But despite all that, they delivered what they remember as one of their best, most charged shows ever.
And that's where the famous story of the lights going out comes from.
Yes. Walk us through that moment.
Midway through the show, the power just cuts out. The whole venue is plunged into complete darkness. And in that environment, the immediate fear for everyone, the band, the audience, was that they were being attacked.
By who? Remnants of the old regime.
Right.
Rival factions.
Who knew? For what they said felt like an eternity, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. They were just frozen in the dark, expecting the absolute worst.
And then what happened? How'd they get the show back on?
The ingenuity was just incredible. It was pure revolutionary necessity. The organizers rushed out and they literally brought the headlights of a car. They positioned a car, ran cables from it, and Kofia finished the concert playing in this beautiful improvised light from these 2 car beams. That image, a band in a revolutionary state, lit by the desperate beams of a car. It's a perfect metaphor for everything they did.
And the danger didn't stop when the music did. After the show, they had this very tense cloak and dagger escape. They left the venue and immediately realized a car was following them through the streets of Tehran.
Which you just can't ignore in that situation.
No way. They had to shake them. They quickly ducked into a side street and had to switch cars under this immense pressure. And there's this moment of dark humor where one of the band members had his flute case, and he remembers thinking, maybe they thought it was a Kalashnikov.
Wow. It just shows the level of tension. And it wasn't just in places like Iran. They faced confrontations in the West, too.
They did. Tori himself was routinely denied visas to Arab countries like Saudi Arabia just for being in Kofia. And then there was the shocking incident in West Berlin. In the middle of a concert, armed soldiers walked directly onto the stage.
Soldiers on stage in West Berlin, that confirms that authorities really saw their music as a direct political threat, not just some cultural event.
It was music that demanded a reaction. And all of this cycle of confrontation and commitment, is what produced their most famous work, Leve Palestina. In Swedish, it's called the demonstrasång.
The demonstration song.
Yeah, it was designed from the ground up to be a tool for mobilization. Tori stressed that songs like this weren't made to make money. They were made by reading the newspaper, finding the story of occupation, and setting it to music so people could sing it together on the streets and raise awareness. It's the ultimate expression of that singing newspaper idea.
Okay, so we have this revolutionary movement from the 70s. How does that music, that spirit, stay so relevant today?
It's all about generational continuity. The founders knew the mission had to be passed on. One member even remembers being a little kid sitting on stage while his dad played, and his job was to hand out roses. He was inheriting the cause.
Passing the torch. So the red thread doesn't die with the first generation?
Exactly. The goal was to transmit it to new generations so that they take over.
Yeah.
As they say in the film, the beautiful thing about music is that it lives on generation after generation. It's an auditory historical record that bypasses censorship.
And Kofia's role is seen as truly foundational for the Palestinian diaspora in Europe.
They're credited with starting the whole Palestinian resistance in the diaspora, specifically in Sweden and Northern Europe. Their dedication, both the Palestinian founders and their Swedish allies, just laid the groundwork for everything that came after.
And the crucial point is that this isn't just history. The fight continues because the situation they were singing about in 1975 is still happening.
Absolutely. The occupation is ongoing, the suffering is ongoing, and that's why the band reformed in 2016 for a very specific reason.
What was that?
The concert was held specifically in solidarity with Gaza. It was a direct connection from their decades of struggle to the acute, ongoing crisis. The mission hasn't changed because the reality of occupation and siege hasn't changed.
And they're still fighting against that same silence Tori found when he first got to Sweden.
The cycle just continues. Tori says, with this real frustration, we see how the Israeli soldiers kill our children and no one react. He calls out the media silence, saying, not even the Swedish television they mention is happenings in the Arab world. So the music, especially an anthem like Leve Palestina, it forces these issues into the open. It refuses to let the world look away.
So the music serves the exact same function today as it did 50 years ago, to be that uncensored voice when official institutions fail.
And it's even harder now. The sources point out that the current Swedish government is, once again, clamps down on pro-Palestine sentiment, including Kofia's songs. And on top of that, we live in this much more individualized society. People are quieter, more focused on their own lives.
So Kofia's legacy becomes this urgent reminder that solidarity has to be active, it has to be vocal, and sometimes, yes, it has to be aggressive in its truth-telling.
Exactly. They proved music could be a precise, durable tool for political education. They weren't making music to get people to dance. They were making it to teach people about their struggle, and because of them, that voice was never exiled into silence.
What a profound and vital story. George Tori, that unwavering red thread, and the dedicated members of Kofia, they took exile and oppression and media silence and forged it into this potent musical weapon. They ensured the Palestinian story was told and heard and felt.
In this whole deep dive, it leaves us with a really important question for you to think about. When traditional media and political bodies consistently fail to address suffering with any kind of moral clarity, how essential does art and music in particular become as our historical, political, and our moral record?
It's often the artists, isn't it? The uncompromising musicians who step in to fill that void of truth. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statements aren't in treaties, but in three chords, a Durbank drum, and the absolute truth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
And here's something to think about on your own. The sources mention that Kofia is working on new material today. So given the current political climate, the censorship, the digital age, how will their unique blend of political storytelling translate and thrive now to make sure that demonstration song is still heard?